Okay, Yvonne, it's all yours.
Okay, well, I'd like to welcome everyone. My name is Yvonne Antonacci from the United States, and I'm honored to serve as president of the World Swing Dance Council. Before I introduce the board and our committees, I would like to read our mission and vision. Our mission is to inspire a global passion for West Coast swing and guide community growth through supporting events, dancers, and competitors with fairness, integrity, and respect. Our vision as a nonprofit organization focused on promoting and growing swing dance by honoring the past, supporting the present, and developing the future, providing resources to educate, expand, and connect the swing dance community, strengthening, guiding, and maintaining the integrity of WSDC registry events. Before we begin our agenda, I would like to take a moment to introduce the dedicated leaders who make up our executive board. Jim Coakley, our Vice President and Treasurer, Jim Tigges, Corporate Secretary, John Lindo, Kay Newhouse, Paul Warden, and Jen Ferrer. I would also like to honor the legacy of our late co-founders, Annie Hirsch and Skippy Blair, who laid the foundation for everything we do today. Next, I would like to introduce the Ombudsman Committee. Since we are having two meetings, not all members will be in attendance. For those of you on this committee, please turn on your video so we can see who you are. Adela Sue from the US, Kyrie Jones, Australia, Colleen Mann, England. Next, I'd like to introduce our Chief Judge Committee. Again, committee members, please turn on your video. We are very proud to have Kelly Casanova as our chairperson from the United States, Yvonne Antonacci as the co-chair and board liaison, Dawn Blorstad, U.S., Estelle Bonaire, U.S., Chuck Brown, U.S., Peter Fradley, Australia, Mark Held, Germany, Demery Leva, U.S., John Lindo, U.S., Irina Puzanova, Russia, Tori Zawi, U.S., and France. I'd also like to introduce one other person who's very crucial and helps the board a lot, our WSDC Administrative Assistant, Ruby Lair from the U.S. Next, Jim Coakley will introduce the International Advisory Committee.
I'd like the committee members to put your video on again so that we can see who are members of the International Advisory Committee. I also want to apologize ahead of time in terms of any pronouncing your name incorrectly. There's a lot of nuances to different languages, so I apologize ahead of time for anything that I say incorrectly. So our co-chairs are Aggie and Julia. Other members of the committee are Attila, Dirk, Gus, Guri, Julia, Livia, Marine, Oya, Rick, Shevin, Z, Zoe, Sohair. Myself and Kay Newhouse are the board representatives and liaisons for the International Advisory Committee.
Okay, next, Paul Warden will introduce the new Affiliated Judges Program committee members.
Hi there. So the newly formed Judges Committee is consisting of myself as the chair from the UK, David Appel as the vice chair from the USA. We have Dawn Bolstad, who is the subcommittee chair of the Standards Commission. We have Maxime Zawi from France, and Robert Cordoba from America, and Yvonne Antonacci as the board liaison. We also have some newer members, our administrative support system, which is Joelle Navarre, who's from France, who sits as our secretary, Vanessa Buckman from Germany, and Martinita from Poland.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Next on the agenda are financials, and Jim Coakley, as our treasurer, will present them.
Yvonne, I think we just wanted to, this was for John. He just wanted to say a list of the scoring systems that we've approved so far.
Okay.
So I'll just name off the scoring systems that we have on the screen: Dance Convention, Dance Place, Event Express Pro, Event Management, Scoring.dance, Swing Director, Swing Wars, Vote for Dance, and World Dance Registry. And then this is just the continuation of some of the committees that will be looking to fill in the next months to years is a tech committee, data analytics committee, communications committee, events committee, rules committee, and there could be more. And I'll pass it back to you, Yvonne.
So on to the financials with Jim Coakley.
So we're really looking at some high level numbers here. There is another slide that gives you more detail, and these will be published, so you'll be able to take a look at this at a later time in more detail if you have questions. This is just giving you a level of where our expenses and income has been for 25 and 26. You'll see that last year we had a total income of 105. We had total expenses of 77,000, and then our reserve was a little under 200,000. So we made money, in 2025. We made $28,871, and so that's why your net reserve was a little bit higher. We also had several expenses that we ended up paying in 2026 that weren't showing on the spreadsheet because we go by the calendar year in terms of when we close out each year. For 2026, you'll see that our gross income is projected to be 167,915. Now, most of that is the extra money of these 60,000 is coming from our additional surcharges, that we instigated this year. So we have an additional 60,000 to be able to work with. Our estimated expenses are at 196,000, and then our reserve, we actually have a negative balance by having total expenses of this 196,000. We'll have a net loss for the year of 28,000. But because we have a reserve, we basically dig into that, and then we end up having roughly 200,000 in the bank. And so our commitment as a board is to have a reserve of 200,000 for our rating day fund or anything expenses that we need to be able to dip into. And then our commitment is to be able to spend our resources that we have, wisely, but to be making sure that we're giving back as much as we can to the community, whether that's in creating improvements to infrastructure, with regard to the organization, whether or not we're providing new grants. So we can go over some of the details later if you have questions, but some of the high level monies that we've spent, we have this new AGP program, which Paul is doing a phenomenal job, and we've had amazing participation and collaboration across the globe. And we currently have spent $35,617 on that particular program. We also have allocated new grants for the year. So we're committed to putting together an education grant of 10,000 and a juniors grant of 10,000. I'm gonna wait until we go through the question and answer period. And if you have other questions related to the financials, I'll be happy to answer those questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want me to go through that other slide that you have right there? This is showing the amount of money that we have for Q2 2026. So this is showing that currently our gross income for the year is $77,000. We've already spent expenses of $84,000. So we have a net loss of $6,600 currently. But again, we're pulling from our reserves to be able to pay those expenses. And we're projecting an additional $60,000 that's going to come into the year. So, we'll prudently, kind of spend that money as it comes in and still maintain our reserve. This is the detail slide that gives you a breakdown of everything. And this again will be something that people will be able to look at at a later time. And if they have questions, they can always, write to us or ask us any questions.
Okay, next is membership. And it's very straightforward. I've divided it into the various areas where we have our events. And you can see Asia Pacific, which includes Asia and Australia. We currently have 17 events. Canada, we have 6, and we have 1 trial event coming up. The international, mainly Europe, there are currently 78 registry events with 14 trial events coming up between the end of 2026 and 2027. The United States currently has 83 registry events and 3 trial events coming up in 2026 and 2027 for a total of registry events of 184 and then 18 trial events that are planned and approved for a total of 202 events. And this is as of June 30th, 2026. I think the next slide, I hope, will show the income that we've received from each of these. We don't have that here, but I want to give it to you. I want to give you that information because I think it's important. So income received from January 1st through June 30th, 2026. Asia Pacific, between membership and surcharge, we've took in $4,534. Canada, $3,348. International, $40,600. The United States, $40,372, for a total income so far that we have received $54,854. Okay, if you have questions regarding that, save them to the end and I'll be happy to answer them. Next, I'm excited for Paul to introduce our affiliated judges program. The entire board and this committee has put in a lot of time to get this going, so I'm going to turn it over to Paul. Thank you.
Almost. Thank you, Yvonne. Sorry, that was muted. So I'm going to finally get to introduce our WSDC certification for our judges, which has been an ongoing project behind the scenes for probably the last 12 to 18 months. And we finally reached a point now where it's time for us to communicate to the community how that was identified, its purpose, its function, how the integration will hopefully work, and what our thought process is over the next 12 months. So we've already described who sits on the Judges Committee and their function, which will be to oversee and manage the judges certification for the WSDC. To give you some history, it's worth going back and looking at why we established that this program would be necessary. We very much looked at our community and recognized that the infrastructure we currently were supporting was not there for the growth of our community. We currently have over 200 events, and when we first started, we were in a much different situation. We identified that we had no way to help support our chief judges and our event directors because we had no metric for managing our judges within our competition setting. We had no way for pathways for newer judges to establish their foothold in our competition community and gain experience in a measured way. We had no way of managing the education and being assured that everybody was coming from the same information, because there was so many different training courses out there and no way to consolidate that. We also recognize that there's a new generation of judges coming into our community who don't have the same experience and therefore need more guidance to be able to do the job that we've been doing. If you've been in the community for some 20 years, every weekend we needed to find a way to integrate that new judge into our community. So after much consideration, we decided that WSTC certification would be an ideal way for us to create a vehicle to do all these things. The next thing we did is we sat down and got the committee together, and then we looked at ways to produce a program that would help us, first of all, create a transition from the existing community that is varied and very unique in different parts of the world in different situations, and integrate that into our existing platform. So we decided on something called the Affiliated Judges Program, or the AJP, and you'll start to see that now on the WSTC website. That has gone live this morning, so you can go there and you'll see tabs and committees and documents that relate to that specifically, and that's one, I say, gone live this morning. The AJP compiles basically around 5 different modules, and those modules are things that already exist within our community, and we've just found a way to make sure that everybody who is certified understands and is compliant with those ideas. So there are things around rules, time management, bias, judges' criteria, scoring systems, and scoring in general. They're all things that our current judges would know, but our newer judges potentially have no way of being confident in their understanding. So this way, it gives them some way to go through a process to make sure they have understood and are compliant with all those areas, which are very consistent across our judging, our registry events. The program is an hour long. It's in a video presentation and it's online. And then it has 4 different levels. So it starts off with our apprentice level, which is non-certified. It then goes into our affiliate level, and then into our associate level, and our highest level is the accredited level. In terms of the impact it will have, the WSTC have looked at this in a lot of detail with recommendations from our Judges Committee, and decided that in 2027 we are going to enforce a rule that our registry events need to find 25% of their Jack and Jill judges to be certified. Now, 25% is a very low number for our first year, and we've done that specifically so that we can achieve it across all our events. Our Judges Committee have been looking at the events that fall in the first 4 months to make sure that they're going to be able to meet this guideline. We have been enrolling people in the program now, or identifying them, for the last 5 to 6 months, and we have probably around 700 people inside the enrollment process, and we've put them into different pathways to, for the better word, fast track that integration with the existing judgings into our program, and we separated them into different groups. The A track is people who have 16 years experience. The B track are people who have between 10 and 15. The C track are between 5 and 10. We then have anybody under that would go into our D track. It's just a way for us to group the community and be able to send out invitations to take the program and participate in a very organized way without missing anybody. We were also releasing very detailed information about the enrollment process on our website, and you are more than welcome to go there and look in more detail if you have more questions. There's 2 documents that are going online today. One is specifically about the enrollment process, and the other one is questions by the community. So things that people have asked either board members or committee members over the last 4 months that we think are pertinent to the whole community to read through. It's worth noting that if you do have any specific worries about your event meeting any of these guidelines, the Judges Committee will be monitoring all the events, either on the way towards your event and during your event, and let you know if you met those guidelines. We're also looking at your current staff or your staffing list from 2026 to see if the people we anticipate being certified will be part of your event already to help you meet that guideline. If there are particular issues, the committee has very clear guidelines on how we can support you in terms of scholarship, in terms of training, in terms of expediting people in your community to meet these guidelines. So what does it mean for the community in terms of what do we do next? So basically, if you can go to the WSTC website now, you'll find a enrollment and eligibility questionnaire. If you haven't filled that in yet, I suggest that you fill that in, and that will help us to identify you, where you are in the world, your experience level, and which pathway we need to put you onto the program. We're anticipating our A and B tracks being engaged in the program by the end of this week, and then our C track within August, and our D track by early September. We anticipate that we would review our progression or our progress as a committee towards the end of September, and then in our in-person meeting, make recommendations to the board on our next steps, and then a public statement on if we are on target or if we have to adjust just before the open in November. If you one of the things we have identified is that, or we want to make clear, is the certification is not a training course. It is a consolidation of your information. So we are recommending that if you feel you need more information or more training, you seek some of the existing judges training courses that are well established within our community. We are asking anybody who has a judges training program who would like to advertise that program on the WSTC website to contact the Judges Committee and send a summary of their training course, and then we will get that listed on the WSTC website so people can obviously find it and then engage in training prior to taking the certification. That information again can be found on the website under questions for the community. In summary, I would just like to say that it's a very difficult process. This judges training, this judges certification, it's a mammoth task, and I do understand that it's unique to each part of the world. So it's really important that now, as event directors and community members, you are looking at your own situation, engaging with the program, filling in the enrollment, taking the certification where possible, and communicating to the Judges Committee if you feel you have particular issues where either you don't have enough judges, you don't have enough training, or you need more support. We really are here to try and collaborate with our community to find a way to meet these metrics in a very slow and progressive way, but meaningful, so that we get to where we'd like to get. We've set a target to meet our guidelines for full integration within 3 years, and we do think that's highly achievable. I would like to encourage anyone to contact the Judges Committee if you have any specific questions, if you're not able to do it today, but if you are, I'll be available for questions at the end of this.
Okay, thank you, Paul, very much. Our next presenter is Jim Tigas, who will review some of our rule changes for 2027. Jim, are you there?
Sorry, I forgot to mute myself. Didn't have a slide of all the changes as it'd be a little bit lengthy, but I'm going to read through them quickly. And as the slide shows, the draft rules for 2027 are up on the website, so you can read that at your leisure. All the changes are highlighted in green, so it's very easy to follow along. But the synopsis includes, we have defined official dates for every registry event. Every member event has an assigned official date approved by the board. The dates or the weekend of the trial event as approved become the event's official dates as a registry event, but they still have the allowance to move forward 1 week or back a week. But the official dates are what we use then for looking for conflicts and what have you. So identified that. In our venues, we've had the 1,600 square foot requirement, and we've clarified that that is not just the room size, but is the actual dance floor area. So that would be, not including seating, DJ booths, platforms, stages, all that kind of stuff. We've also clarified that all venues for competition rooms must be listed and approved by the board, not just the main ballroom, so to speak. We have added some verbiage regarding non-hotel venues and noted they must have appropriate ambiance and staging, sufficient dance floor, lighting, sound systems, entry space, restrooms, available water, etc., as suitable for a public function. Those are some requirements for events that aren't in a hotel. We've clarified for our trial events that they must have a certified chief judge, but they must be gold or platinum level, just have that higher experience to guide the newer events. We've also clarified under existing event changes, if 2 or more of the following are in place, then it becomes a new event and must go through the trial event process. So if you have a change of location of greater than 100 miles or outside your metro area, a change in name or a change in dates, those are 3 things that come into play. If you have 2 of those changing, it becomes a new event. We've also clarified, for our rule has been a minimum of 5 contestants in each role to be a tier 1. But if there's 5 in one role, only 5 in one role, and 5 or 10 in the other, then the event may run a prelim and cut to as low as 3 in the finals. So you don't have to have 5 minimum in the finals for those tier 1 contests. Reminder that combined contests must be reported as combined on the event reporting form. We've clarified event rules must be posted within 3 days after the event, which can also be on their website or with a link to the scoring program systems website or what have you. Just a reminder, competitors in incorrect levels don't receive their points if they do place for some reason, nor someone who competed who is not allowed to be at the event or in a division also would not receive points. A new change is in Tier 2 contests with 11 to 19 in a row. Without a prelim, will receive points for first to third, similar to Tier 1. But if a Tier 2 contest has a prelim with a cut, then they'll receive the 2 tier points and through 5th place as per the existing structure. We've also clarified that prelims are optional in Tier 1 and Tier 2 contests. Exceptions. We have clarified that immediate family members of the event director owner may not be chief judge or scorer, and the event director's immediate family members cannot compete, other than children of the event director under 18 years of age, as may be allowed by another organization's rules for contests within their genre. And then we have, under our definitions, we have defined immediate family to include spouse, domestic partner, significant other, children, parents, in-laws, and siblings. Reminder that access to contest scores is only for the chief judge, secondary chief judge, the scorer, and the scoring system developer. But the results may be issued prior to announcements to the person writing checks and doing the awards, etc. We've clarified in our conflicts of interest for who you can't judge, that judges can't judge. And we've clarified that your dancing partners will also include those who are promoted or contracted together at that specific event, besides just the regular partnerships that we all know about. Reminder, if conflicts are discovered after a contest, that judges' scores shall be removed and replaced with the chief judges. We've clarified or made an exception that judging conflicts may be allowable in All-American or other any level fun contests at the discretion of the event director or the chief judge. And again, new for 27 is this 25% of events must have a certified chief judge, which Paul just went through. And again, we'll grant a grace period from January through March, the first quarter, for those existing events that may not meet that requirement, but it looks like that is going to be a problem. We have added an appendix for a suggested structure for randomization options if there's a conflict between competitors. A chief judge may assign a raw score for each role, especially, i.e., like when there's two contests running concurrently and the chief judge may not be on both sides at the same time. And reminder, with a certified chief judge, the event will not be penalized for rules violations that the chief judge is responsible for enforcing and following. And finally, we've also added an appendix for running self-judge contests, which is allowable for champions and invitationals. Again, all the updated rules are on the website, and you can peruse at your leisure. Thank you.
Next,
Thank you, Jim.
Kay will present the grants that were issued in 2025. Go ahead,
Thanks,
Kay.
Yvonne, and thank you, Jim. So I'm going to show you, we have on these slides both the grants that we did towards the end of 2025, since that's after the last general meeting we did, and also one that we have already awarded this year. So Jen, if you'll move to the next slide, we can go through these. So the first one for this one should actually say 2026 grant went to the Ukrainian West Coast Swing community to help them maintain their access to West Coast Swing education. That was a targeted grant that the WSDC solicited from that community in order to support their continued engagement with West Coast Swing during a period of duress for that community. We move to the next slide. We're going to look back in time a little bit to the end of 2025. Most of you may recall that we did a public call for proposals for grants around preserving the history of West Coast Swing. This one is to specifically work on the piece of our mission that's about honoring the past. Next slide. Our grant review process for this, we had external reviewers. We had 7 people who volunteered to do that. We had a standardized rubric that we handed them that asked for proposals that were realistic, well-developed, strongly tied to the community, and closely aligned with the goals of the grant as laid out in the request for proposals. Our original budget was $3,000 for this grant, but we had such strong applications that the board opted to increase the amount that was allocated to this grant. So we move to the next slide. Our overall winner was a project called Archiving the Open, which was submitted by Jessica McCurdy. So that project was awarded $3,000. I should also sidebar just a little bit to say that some of you will note that we have a board member who is closely connected to the Open. John Lindo was actually recused from this whole process because we knew, once we knew we had this grant application coming in from Jessica, we wanted to make sure that he wasn't engaged with any of the discussion surrounding these grants, so that we do have a formal recusal process when grant members for any matter have financial engagement or other conflicts of interest that mean that they shouldn't be part of the decision-making body, and that was activated in this case. So John wasn't voting on the grants, but also wasn't involved in the discussion of how they were structured or anything like that. So if we move to the next slide, our grant runners up. So these were the extra ones that the board decided to award. A capacity building grant for Andreas for the video archiving he does. His last name's not spelled right, apologies. But so many of you know that Andreas does a ton of work with those videos. So this is to support capacity building there. Ben O'Neill is doing a project interviewing people to help deepen understanding of the history of West Coast Swing. Max Zaddy, that's Maddie, Zach, and Mackenzie, I believe, together are doing a project on preserving the legacy and growing the history of West Coast Swing. Again, interviews, but then through podcasts. And the last one was the Next Gen Swing Dance Club, which is connected to Boogie by the Bay, has had another digitization and video preservation project. So each of those projects was awarded $1,000, so a partial grant towards the things that they had told us they wanted to work on. So the last slide is just to give thanks to our volunteer reviewers. These people were anonymous during the project, but gave us permission to share their names now. We are very thankful for their reviewing the proposals and advising the board on the strength of them, and they're the ones who helped determine how that funding was awarded. I think that's it for grants. Oh, yes, no, it's not. That's not it. The very exciting news on this last slide is that we've approved up to $20,000 from the board budget for new grants, and we'll announce the topics of those grants shortly. We've already dispersed about $1,000 of that, as you saw, to the Ukrainian community, but the balance of that $20,000 will be going out as requests for proposals. So please keep an eye on our social media and our email list. We will try to get the word out as best we can when that request for proposals goes out, and what those topics will be and the criteria for the grants.
Thank you, Kay. Next is our tech update, and I believe Jen is going to handle that. Jen, are you there?
The tech update is done by Jim.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
The biggest project that we're working on right now is updating our upload for all of our results from each competition. And we have a wonderful committee of people, of professional score developers that have donated their time to be able to work on this project. It's been months that they've been working on this, and we're hoping that we'll be able to roll this out in about a month and a half. And this will create, better streamlining for events to be able to upload their events information, and will give more comprehensive information to the WSDC for us to be able to do better analysis of data. We're also, John is working on a tech committee to be able to gather people who can help to analyze data, to be able to look on more global picture items, to be able to strategize and to look to see, how we can leverage some of the intelligent people in our community to help us analyze data that we have, or to go out into the community and gather that data so that we can be able to make informed decisions. Similar, we have that on multiple fronts, but like one analysis that we're looking at is because our trial event process has kind of been on a pause. We're looking to gather data to be able to make better informed decisions in terms of how we are creating smart growth that is sustainable.
And I'll kind of echo what Jim is talking about when it comes to the events that we have put on essentially a hold for the past, for the next 6 months. Part of the reason why the board has decided to initiate this hold is due to letters from event directors, specifically requesting a change in the new event process. And because if we're looking at it from the statistics that we already have for the first half of 2026, the majority of events are down by at least 50 participants. This is, data that we have gathered, but again, we as a board do not want to make any new changes to how we're implementing the rules to have a new event. And so because of that, we've decided to take a pause. Hopefully the data analytics committee will be able to give us more data on the event structure, on area and population. That way we can move forward, making the best decisions for the entire community when it comes to new events and how we can support current events within the WSDC. And
Okay.
I will continue as I talk about the All-Star Champ survey. And so why did we put out the survey? Well, a few things from the board. We have been receiving requests from champions dancers to revisit our point structure from All-Star to champion. And as a board, we also asked ourselves, how are we supporting the integrity of our highest competitors? But also, these rules impact everybody within the community, not just our high-level dancers. So we asked the community for feedback in regards to a previous rule that applied to All-Stars. Here is just a high-level view of the survey results. We had 412 total responses. Of those responses, 229 were All-Stars, 38 were champions, 145 were individuals from other divisions or retired dancers in the competition aspect. And the overwhelming majority was 78% were not in favor of this rule. Here is just a different way to look at it. You can see based on the level of an individual, the number of people that responded to the survey, those who were no, not in favor, those who were in favor, and then those who were undecided. We also asked questions on how many years you were in the current division that you were representing. So people within their division of 10 and plus years, there were 76 people who have been competing in that specific division for 76 people. 6 to 10 years was 90, the 3 to 6 years, 72, and 0 to 3 years, 174. And again, you can see the overwhelming result is that people were not in favor of this rule. I did 51 follow-up interviews with people who had responded that they were interested in having a follow-up conversation with the board member. And with those follow-ups, I asked pretty much 4 distinct questions, which would you be in favor of extending the rules from 3 to 5 years? The overwhelming majority said no. We asked if there was exceptions to the rule, would you be in favor of it? And they said, yes, we would be in favor of it, but it's still not relevant to this rule when we don't believe that it should be enacted again. What if we took away the mandatory move from all-star to champions? The overwhelming majority was in support of that. And another question was, do we change the point structure for like an ELO style point structure? And most people were unsure, or they said the current structure works, but we would just like to see a revision if needed based on data. So in conclusion from this survey, we're not interested in making any decisions without data to support any change that we make. And our hope is that with the new data analytics committee that we can reevaluate our point structure if needed, but we also just want to make decisions that keep the integrity of every division. And I will pass it over to Kay.
Sounds like Yvonne wants to also pass over to me. Yes, Yvonne?
You're good, Kay. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. Hi, folks. So we're going to move into our Q&A portion of this meeting now. So we have close to 40 minutes to answer your questions as best we can. We expect, so some of you already dropped questions in our chat as we went. That's fantastic. Most of the things that have been dropped in the chat so far are clarifications on things that we've already talked about in this presentation. So Jen and I are going to go through those for you. And we also expect you may have some things that you would like to bring to the board's attention in the form of suggestions for future rule changes or things that you would like us to look at. We also may hear from you at this point, observations or information that you want to bring to the attention of the board. We will remind everybody that this is not a space in which we're going to make new decisions, but we can explain the things that we presented today. We can also annotate things that you would like us to take back into decision-making space in the various ways we do that. Also listed on this slide is our contact information page. So that has a list of emails. If you have various kinds of needs, the people that you can reach for those questions, especially if we don't get to something, or if you're someone who thinks of your question later, that's the page where you can always find contact information. Also, most of us board members are very happy to field questions from you as we go. Last thing on this slide, it says our next in-person general meeting is November 28th, 2026 in Burbank, California. We generally do that one in person. We try to stream it, but obviously hybrid is more difficult. So we're going to move to some of the questions that have already been put in the chat. I'm going to scroll back to one that came in really early. Tracy Wang asked, what are the details associated with the $32,000 budget allocation to the AJP budget? Paul Worden, would you like to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I was a bit naughty. I kind of went through the questions and did some homework while everyone was doing their presentation. So, Tracy, specifically, I can tell you that it was around $25,000 for the actual creation of the filming and the studio and the direction and the script editing and the graphics and the music and the building of the program. And when you see it, I think you'll see definitely where that money went. It's at a very high standard. It's really professional. It's very slick. We also spent around 5,000 producing the document that we used to consolidate the information that already exists. Obviously, some of it was quite old. It was all disjointed, and we had to draw upon the committee's resources to consolidate that into a very clear document that could then be used to create a dialogue script. And that took around 5,000. And then we also invested around 3,000, another 5,000 with Andreas to build the back office suite where the presentation will be housed. I think that comes to about the amount that we've stated.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Welcome.
And thank you, Tracy, for that question. So Jeannie DeGuider asked, are there year-over-year growth numbers for membership? So Yvonne, you presented our current membership numbers. I know normally John Lindo is kind of the keeper of a lot of this information, and he was not able to join us this morning. But Yvonne, do you have either concrete numbers or?
I'd have to go back and look at them, but I can put something together and we can post it. But every year at our general meetings, I do have a slide that shows from year to year what it is. So I don't have it available this minute, but I can get it for you.
So we can anticipate that at our end of year meeting in November.
Yes, and the reason we only went from January to June this time around is because of the increase in the surcharge. It would look very lopsided. So it wouldn't have been a true picture, but I can do the comparisons for you at our general meeting in November.
Great. So our next question came from Jesse. How do judges enroll in the AJP? Paul, do you want to take that one too?
Yep, sure. So currently our enrollment process is a questionnaire you'll find on the website now. It's listed as eligibility and enrollment questionnaire. If you fill that, it will go directly to our secretary, who will process you and add you to one of our groups based on the experience that you dictate or you denote on your enrollment application.
So a follow-up question from Joanna was if I don't have the exact words in front of me, but she asked if we have if you have a bunch of events coming up, can a person move from category to category?
In terms of enrollment or in terms of designation?
Joanna, do you want to come on and clarify your question?
I mean, I can tell you both. It's probably easier actually, because the more information, the better. So, yeah, so you can't change your enrollment process because that's based on your experience, and obviously you can't change that when you fill it in. Your experience is your experience. That will dictate where your enrollment process goes and which pathway you are put on. But you can change your designation based on your pass rate. So depending on your pass rate of the material, that will dictate where you end up at the other side of the program in terms of the associate, affiliate, or accredited level.
Great. So another question on the AJP came from Tommy Gibbs. As this develops, what impact will it likely have on event directors' staffing budget?
So this was a question that really taxed us very early on, and we were highly concerned and got a lot of resistance. And we looked into it in a lot of detail. And one thing we commissioned was a survey of our events in the first half of next year to see if the people who were enrolling in the program would be part of their event staff already. And we found that only 2 events were not able to meet the 25% metric in the first 2 months of 2027. Every other event was hitting percentages of around 30 to 40 to 50% as we go down through the year. So, which is why we ended up coming backwards and using a very low marker for our first year to make sure that all these events are going to make this 25%. So, in terms of having to employ new judges that you wouldn't already employ, we weren't seeing that when we looked at the data. We're seeing that it's judges who are already in your existing pool who we are putting through the process this year. So when your event happens next year, there is a high percentage and that you will be already meeting your 25%.
So Paul, I believe that's based on the assumption / hope that the judges who filled out that questionnaire for us and are already grouped into our ABC will do the next steps to get certification. Do you want to speak at all to that?
So, I mean, you will get an invitation. We'll be putting out, I said in the presentation, our A and B tracks will be coming out before the end of this week. The only thing I can advise is when you get it, if you're part of our existing pool, it would be so helpful if you could do the certification as soon as you get it, and then we can start to see this list coming up in September. And I think that's going to give a lot of event directors and the community and myself and the board more assurance that we're going to be able to follow this transition. If our existing judges see that program sat in their email box and don't engage with chasing people, that could slow down the transition quite heavily and cause more concern down the line. So we do have a very strong team of administrators who will be chasing people. So I would just say the biggest contribution you can make if you are supporting the program is once you get your enrollment, if you could do the online training and take the examination, that would be a huge help for us.
Thanks, Paul. I'm just going to add for everybody's knowledge, the board members ourselves just got the links to go through this certification, and some of us qualify for the A level, but we're all going to go through the slightly more thorough B level so that we can do what we're asking of you all. And we got those links today. So our self goal is to do that in the next 48 hours so that we can give that feedback. Ben McHenry asked, will there be a fee associated with AJP certification?
No.
Nope, that's related to Tracy's question about the board is supporting all costs of this program at this time. Let's see. Another question based for the AJP comes from Alex Brand. How is the percentage calculated for AJP certified judges at the event? Is it based on the overall judge list at the entire event, or for just for WSDC Jack and Jill contest, or is it a ratio? How is that being calculated?
So it will be counted specifically on the Jack and Jill judges, people who participate in judging Jack and Jill only. And we have looked at the 25% metric to see you've met that based on the names who have enrolled, not necessarily what they judge. So there is a deviation there, which is again why the board recommends we come back from a more substantial number to a much more achievable number of 25%. Because of that deviation, where we had to use last year's staffing rota, and also we'll be looking at judges who specifically do Jack and Jill, but we don't necessarily know who that will be because most events haven't done their staffing rotas for this year. So there is a deviation there, which is why the board recommended we step back the integration to a more achievable number.
Paul, another question from Jeannie de Guyder. You mentioned scholarships. If events have trouble meeting that 25%, what are the details of scholarships or assistance that you'd be giving them?
So all of our recommended training courses who will be listed on the WSC website have agreed to enter into a shared scholarship system with the Judges Committee, where we will be able to allocate entry to some of the recognizable training courses, judges training courses, for people who potentially struggle to either get to courses or afford courses, or need to have a large amount of training done in a growth area because they don't have any resources there. So we'll be able to look at that and potentially help with some of the training costs in that area.
Paul, do you want to speak a little more to the difference between a training program and the AJP certification, just to make sure people have those two different things clarified in their minds? We've got a couple questions along those lines.
Yeah. I mean, it was very much something that came up early with a colleague of mine, and they're very experienced, and we were talking on cross purposes for ages, and I'm like, I just need to call them and explain the difference. And they kept saying, you know, which certifications will you be accepting and which programs? And the AJP of the Affiliated Judges Program is the only certification that the WSDC recognizes. But we advise you to take as many training courses as humanly possible to increase your knowledge. You should always be, as a judge, as an educator, always trying to take on more knowledge and further your resources. But the difference between judges training, We are not doing any judges training as a WSTC. We are simply certifying you as a judge, testing the knowledge that you have. You need to go forth and get that experience either through mock judging, real judging, or judges training with the existing courses that are in our community.
Great, thank you. And I think you already spoke to if people have judge training programs that they are already doing, how to reach out to you to help the committee understand the outline of that training so that they could be one of those recommended training programs as the AJP is pushing on information about this. So we have, I think this from Joe Mahoney is a little bit more of an observation than a question, but he says if judges become certified, what makes us believe that those certified judges won't begin expecting or demanding higher compensation because of the certification? Many events are operating on tight budgets, and increasing judging costs could make it difficult to hire experienced professionals. I worry that a certification could unintentionally create financial barriers for events and judges if compensation expectations begin to change. So I think that, go ahead if you'd like to respond.
Sorry, yeah. I was going to say, I think this is an absolutely valid point, and it would be remiss of me to dismiss this, but it's almost impossible for me to anticipate how our community will develop in the future. What I will say is that we're a very flexible and resilient group of people, and if we see change happening, then we will do things to help facilitate that change in the right way. I would say that once we create this robust training in place, there will be other options for you to draw on. It won't, at the minute, we have a very small pool where you are limited to who you can engage with. If that person then turns around and says, I want X amount of money to be part of your event, you will have, as an event director, other options in the program who potentially are willing to gain experience, who potentially are not willing to charge exponential costs. We all know how our community works, and we set our own rates. We decide on our worth, and then we set a rate that equals that. And a lot of contracts and negotiation that happens is sometimes around someone looking at the resources of an event and then deciding how much they will charge to help facilitate that event's growth. That's a very common practice within our community, to adjust what you do to basically serve the community in some way. If somebody is not willing to do that, if they're willing to, push their expenses, you have choices, and we'll make sure that we have a robust resource of people and other options for you to draw on.
Terrific. And I'm just going to highlight one of the things that you said, because from my view as a board member, I said it's really important, which is that part of the goal of this program is to create a pathway for new judges and for judges to have a way to show their expertise, which hopefully will expand our judging pool. That's really part of the goal of the program. I'm going to move to some questions that are not about the AJP. We do still have more questions about AJP. So we'll come back to some of those if we get through some of the other questions in here. We might come back to you, Paul. Absolutely.
If we don't get through them all, I will take them all, and I will get back to everyone by email. So I will definitely get to them.
So Paul is super hardworking and responsive. I can say right now that all of the board members are reachable by email. Most of us are also on Facebook for the follow-up things, but also there is contact information for our committees on that contact page that's listed on this slide. So if you have questions that we didn't get to, do please follow up. Right now, we're going to go to some of the questions about rules, and then if we have time, we might come back to some of the other AJP questions which have popped up as we've gone. So I'm going to go to one from Katie Montgomery. There's a new rule that states non-hotel venues must have appropriate ambiance. How is appropriate being defined in that? Jim Tigas, do you want to speak to that one since you're our rules keeper?
Yeah, obviously, that's a subjective term. It's just a way to bring across the idea that there has to be some sort of special feeling that's not like here in the United States we might have a typical studio that's 4 walls and a suspended ceiling and fluorescent lights, versus a hotel which has beautiful design, whatever. So it's just one word to use that not just a plain white box, but it obviously doesn't have to be a super expensive castle or something. So it is a subjective term. But it gives the board some leeway to understand, what does this venue look like? Is this appropriate for a registry event that meets the stature and sophistication and whatever that we want for our events? So how's it being defined? I guess at a case-by-case basis, but it really is just meant to be something besides a bland box, studio type space.
I'm going to add one thing to that, which is the rest of that sentence also says, specifies now that the event must offer things like bathroom facilities and water, and some other sort of straightforward things that I think most of us have assumed, but we put them in details into that paragraph now. Another question from Katie. Can someone speak to the decision about changes to Tier 2 comps to encourage prelims and drop points if no prelims for competitions under 10 dancers per side?
I think that should be Jim Tigas also.
Okay.
Unless you want to take it, Kay.
Yeah.
Sure, I can take that one and also combine it with the question about the change to Tier 1 comps. So our Tier 1 comps in the past, if you had exactly 5 entries, there was no way to run a prelim. It was sort of a little anomaly in our rules because most of the time events are able to run a prelim. This change to the rules makes it so that in the past you had to have 5 dancers in your finals, but also 5 dancers entering in order to have a contest. So there was no way to run a prelim. Now our rules give the ability to run a prelim and cut to as few as 3 if you only had 5 dancers who entered. It's not a requirement, but it's just flexibility for our chief judges. So for Tier 2, there's a change to the points structure so that essentially what it does is if an event or a chief judge decides not to run prelims in a Tier 2 comp, so those are, I believe, are 11 to 19, if I'm remembering right. So, and typically it would be like 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, where an event might decide not to run comps. That's what we usually, not to run prelims. That's what we usually see. At this point, the number of points that are given out would drop to the number that are given out in our old Tier 1. So it's now Tier 2A, Tier 2B, it's the way that we separated it. That is, in fact, to encourage prelims a little bit and to make it so that we are giving. So what we see from chief judges is that there's sometimes pressure to keep maximum number of competitors in a prelim, in finals, to give out like all the points that are available. And also that we have the sort of randomness that happens with comps. We typically see prelims are used in order to get a stronger set of finalists into the contest. Changing the number of points is essentially an acknowledgement that when we don't run prelims, the full field isn't quite as strong. So it's constraining the number of dancers to get points to the top. I think it's 3 places, if I'm remembering correctly, rather than going up to 5. Are there any other board members that want to add something to that explanation? You guys are all looking at me. It's a little bit complicated. Some of these things that you see in the rules are actually in there to allow our chief judges a little bit more flexibility and in response to things that we've been hearing about the kinds of pressures that they are trying to navigate as they're structuring our contest. So I should add that these decisions typically are made by our chief judges in consultation with event directors or with, looking at the field of their dancers and what makes sense for that event. The points that we're giving out are things that we're trying to balance how our events are working kind of all over the world. And you are correct that there's a little bit of extra pressure from us to run prelims. That is in some ways also related to our the points survey that Jen was talking about, where we asked about expiring points. We were looking at that, making prelims a little bit more encouraged is a related question, which doesn't change like our overall structure, and it doesn't change, the points you get to keep. It does change a little bit how points are earned. So I don't know if that's a clear enough answer. But
as Kate pointed out, those changes were that was some of the input we got back from champions and all-stars and event directors. So that whole tweak was definitely a response to a request from the community.
Yes, thank you, Jen. Let me see. Let me find another. So a question from Suma. Jim Tigas, this might also be for you since it's a rules question. How is someone who is not allowed to be at the event or compete defined?
I think that came in from, again, we've had so much conversation about sexual predators and whatever, and that's a very tricky topic, and we want to remind everybody that each state, each country has various rules on all the things, private events versus public, what that means, what you can or cannot do, proof, convicted versus accusations. But we all know some events have restricted certain people from attending, and if somehow they slip through the cracks and get in and get into a contest, that if the event director has a stated policy that that person isn't allowed, then if for some reason they got in a contest and for some reason they placed, they would not get a point because they weren't supposed to be in a contest.
Any other board members want to add something to that?
The only thing I'd like to add is that we have checked with our attorney on how to handle problems that arise. And we did post a letter for event directors. It's really up to the individual events to have something in their code of conduct that they can go back to and restrict people from attending their event. But we also emphasize that you need to check your local rules for your state, how to go about doing that. We want to leave that up to the event directors. It's at their discretion how they handle things. And again, it's through your code of conduct, and it's checking what the legal rules are for your individual state. And Jim is right. If somebody, ended up at the event that wasn't supposed to be at the event, and they competed, they will not be awarded the points once we're informed who they are. So that's it. Thank you for that question.
Yeah, I'm going to add a little bit to that. I think also there's some much more quotidian reasons why someone might not be able to compete, or a little bit more based on our rules. So for example, if we had a chief judges are not allowed to compete if there was for some reason a chief judge to compete. It used to be true that the children of event directors were not allowed to compete. There is now a carve out for those who are under 18. But in the past, that would be an example of someone who's not allowed to compete at an event where points wouldn't be awarded. So it's clarifying that it is not just if you're in the wrong category of competition, but if you're actually not allowed to compete at all. And then I'm going to also speak to what Jim and Yvonne just said, which is there is, I think, rightfully a lot of discussion in our community right now among event directors and among our attendees about what do we do about people who are potentially dangerous to the community around them, who have assault convictions or not convictions, but other reasons why an event does not want them to attend. And with the WSDC, we sent a letter to our event directors clarifying our stance that when it is legal where you are, which this depends on your jurisdiction, but in most places, for example, the events that I help to run, our events are private parties, so we can tell someone that you're not allowed to attend. And that is something that we sometimes do when we have a person that we feel is dangerous to our community. And the WSDC stands behind events doing that. But we also recommend that your code of conduct and your internal rules are kind of consistent and you're checking all your boxes on that. I also would highlight, since we're on this topic, that there's an addendum to the rules right now that talks about a case in which an event has a conflict between two WSDC rules. The two rules that sometimes come in conflict. One is that we require randomization in our contests. The other is that we require events to follow their own codes of conduct. So if you have a code of conduct, you've got an implementation plan, you need to be responsibly administering that. We have had some events that come to us and say these two rules are in conflict for us. So based on the rules, the laws where we are and our code of conduct, we've got two people that can't draw each other in this contest. And based on the way that we run those same things, our laws where we are and our code of conduct, they're both going to be in the same contest. So that the directions there outline some options for an event and what you can do surrounding that. So those are meant for chief judges, but they're out there where we can all see them. If you end up in the case where, based on all of that documentation, there are times when an event may have their code of conduct and their local laws take precedence over our randomization rule in a very narrow specific case that is explained in that addendum right at the end of the rules. But there's also a requirement that if that does in fact happen, you must notify the WSDC. And at that point, we need to see that documentation. We need to see exactly what you were dealing with in the decision making there. We would ask you to redact as many details as you can, because you are, you generally have a responsibility to maintain privacy of people involved, but you do have a requirement to notify us if that randomization was compromised. I'm going to pause there and ask if any other board members want to hop in on any of those things.
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying the other side of that. Again, a score person and chief judge, can't compete. So that's also where that rule came from. The people not allowed, this was forefront in my mind due to some recent activities, but that's the other reason. All those roles that are not allowed to compete, should they somehow compete. Good clarification.
Another example of that would be if you were an intermediate dancer and you dance a newcomer. And most registration systems prevent that from happening. But let's say some mishap occurred, and we got those results. We would reach back out to the event director. They would need to notify the participant that they wouldn't be getting points because they weren't eligible for that division. And then again, kind of plays into this rule.
Great, thanks everybody. I'm going to go to another question from Joe Mahoney. He says, I'd like to ask for some clarification regarding accountability. If the World Swing Dance Council is certifying judges and there's a discrepancy in how an event is judged or how the chief judge carries out their responsibilities, who ultimately bears the responsibility? Is it at the event director, the certified chief judge, or the World Swing Dance Council? Yvonne, would you like to speak to that?
Sure.
Is it coming from the chief judge committee?
If you have hired a certified chief judge and a WSDC rule was broken, that certified chief judge is accountable for that, not the event, because the event went ahead and hired a certified chief judge. If a rule was broken, we receive a report or we're told about it being broken. It goes to the chief judge committee, and the chief judge committee will gather the data. We will interview the chief judge and anybody else that's involved. We will record the interview, and then the entire committee will vote on what the accountability should be for that certified chief judge. And we have a chart, just as we have a chart on our rules. If an event director breaks a rule, we have a chart made up for that, for whatever infraction is incurred. And we will vote if they're found guilty of breaking a rule, and then the committee will decide what the penalty would be for that. And we have had several cases where it's happened, where certified chief judges have dropped in their level. They've gone from platinum to gold and gold to silver. If they happen to be on a committee, because we hold our committee members at a higher standard, and we've had 2 committee members, they've received an internal penalty as far as the committee is concerned. So there is accountability for certified chief judges, and it's done internally. We don't publicize who those people are, but if any event director wanted information, we would be transparent if there was something that they needed to know. As far as an event being accountable, if you did not hire a certified chief judge, and that is your choice, then you would be accountable for any WSDC rule infractions. And those are listed on our website. You can see them in the rules, what they are.
Sorry.
You want to add to, and then we have the action plan, and I'm going to let Kay talk about the action plan.
That's what I was going to jump in on. So the model that we typically use if we have an event who violated WSDC rules, when that event is responsible to the WSDC, what we typically do in that case is we go to the event and we ask them to work with us to develop an action plan. So this is a model which is based on the idea that we want to learn from those mistakes and make sure they don't happen again, and also repair whatever damage was caused at the time. So we ask the event to help to develop a formal plan there, which ends up needing to be approved both by the board and by the event and their accountability steps to make sure that whatever that thing is that happened, we are sure it's not going to happen again. I will tell you all a little inside information, which is that the most common rule violation that we get that's caused by individual judges is that someone doesn't disclose to the chief judge that they have a conflict in a contest. So they end up like judging their dance partner, their spouse, or somebody like that. It is the responsibility, I think every event will tell you, it's the responsibility of the judges to disclose those things to the chief judge. It puts the event in a very difficult situation when a judge has not properly disclosed. We have made one change this year to hopefully help a little bit with that, which is most of the time we were seeing those errors from judges. It was during those all-American, all-European type contests where the general goal of the event tends to be like everybody enter, everybody can draw anybody. And that's the category where we saw the most frequent errors, because what we were seeing was judges who just didn't realize that it was so important in that contest. We've made a change to our rules. And we did some discussion of this with, among others, the IAC. That's one of the places we got a lot of feedback on rules, and then with a bunch of other sources. And that is now officially a carve out. Those specific like all-American type contests are now a carve out. So judges can end up judging people they're not normally allowed to judge in those contests. We made that change both because we felt like coming from the community side, people just, most of our community just wasn't seeing those as meaningful conflicts, which is partly why the judges themselves were missing it. And also because typically the ethos of those contests is everybody in. And when we have all of these restrictive conflict of interest rules in an area where it feels, it's a fun contest, it's usually, most of those are not, as primary for the event, and we don't give points for them. So we've now carved those out. So those are places where an event or a chief judge could elect to have a judge judge something which would normally be considered a conflict. Still a good idea to disclose it if you're a judge. But I think this is talking about like where are loops of communication. The event is ultimately responsible to the WSDC for those things. So if a judge doesn't disclose, you're causing a problem for the event, for your chief judge and for the event itself. You might, frankly, as a judge, be impacting how much people want to hire you if you keep forgetting to disclose conflicts of interest, because it creates, it really is a big deal for the people around you. But we try to use that action plan model. Paul, I'm going to go to you for a second, though, because I believe on the horizon for AJP is also discussion about some of these things related to certified judges. Am I right?
Is that the question? Sorry, which question are you talking about?
Yeah, Paul, do you want to talk a little bit to the idea of certified judges? So this is now clarifying from certified chief judges, which Yvonne was just talking about. The judges who are certified through the AJP, I believe you all are working on some accountability things for judge ethics or judge procedural issues and things like that. Do you want to speak to that?
Absolutely, yeah. So although we haven't fully had everything approved by the board yet, we're in that final stage. We have, as a judges committee, we have submitted our outline for how we would like to oversee and govern that. It will be a subcommittee that Dawn Bolsters will head up, and will be reviewing specific breaches of either conflict or rules or complaints or issues. We'll be liaising directly with the Chief Judge Committee, so we'll expect those to come in via the Chief Judges to the subcommittee, and then from there we will then look at if we see potential judges who are constantly not completing their conflicts of interest or making breaches in our rules, then the Judges Committee may, when it's approved, take action accordingly to either reduce someone's availability to judge or facility to judge. Again, but we haven't fully finalised what that will be yet. But we are definitely looking to support the chief judges by putting some of that accountability back to the judge themselves, rather than putting all of that onto the chief judge, so we can start to manage and have a bigger impact on the integrity of our competitions at the judges level.
Perfect. Jim Coakley, you had something to add as well?
Just before we end, I want to make sure that we remind people, that we're looking always to be collaborative and working with event directors and with the community. And the IAC is a huge partner for us in terms of being able to gather information, for us to be able to bring problems or questions that we have to them, for them to listen, to give feedback, for them to do research, reach out to other people in the community. Also, I just want, as you're here, at this meeting, to remember that they are a resource for you. So if you have some topic, or if there is something that you want on a local level or a global level, and you want to bring that to the board, or you want to help us, in that collaborative mode, please bring those questions, those suggestions to your IAC member in your area, or to any IAC member that you see in an event. And that will help us, gather that information and to support you better.
Thanks, Jim. I think you just gave us a really good segue into Ben McHenry's question, which is, why did we implement a carve-out specifically for ED's children at their own events? It would seem that the conflict of interest may actually be more present with a junior. He says, I'm all for supporting opportunities for younger dancers wherever possible, but this feels in contradiction with other WSDC precedents and goals. And Ben, you are absolutely identifying something that the board has gone back and forth on, because there is a very strong argument that children of EDs present a conflict of interest in terms of competing at that event. Judges might feel pressured to judge one way or another based on that being the child of an owner or an event director. The board got a lot of feedback on this one, including from the IAC. And we looked really thoroughly at this issue, and we actually did change our minds on it. And I will say the reason for this is because this is one where we were weighing the conflict of interest, the perception of conflict of interest, concerns about that, with the fact that children are a really valuable resource in our community. We are at this point not seeing as much support for juniors kind of overall in our community as we think would be good and healthy for our community. And right now, the strongest support we're seeing institutionally for getting juniors interested and involved in this dance is actually coming from parents whose own children are in that group. And so what we were seeing was that our rule, which prevented the juniors from competing at their parents' event, was having a much stronger impact than we anticipated on the organizing of children, which is already sort of a thin thread right now. So our hope is that by allowing children to compete, the children of the event directors and the owners, we are hopeful that our judges will maintain good integrity on these judges. We actually have very strong belief that our judges are capable of judging fairly, no matter who's in front of them. I think our hope is that our community will understand that and support the idea that having those groups of children, the organizing that those event directors whose children are in the same age group are providing to our community is so valuable that as a community we're willing to say, you know what, we trust those judges. So that's our hope. Do any other board members want to speak to that one as well?
Ben, I just want to say I was very conflicted with this, but then when you look at the children of those parents that are the event director, they have such a huge impact, and the energy level that they bring to those events, they are leaders of their community, and they are, when you take them out, if you put them on the sideline, then they can't fully participate. They can be there to, support their friends and their, other people in their community, but they can't fully express themselves. They can't fully be a leader. They can't, enjoy, competing with their friends and being completely present and available at that event. And it has a negative impact
And when we're looking at this is a very small portion of the community, you know, where this happens, and it's the dedication of those families that is driving the growth of those young dancers. And when you take that leg away, where that child can't be a participant, can't be a leader, can't be fully engaged, it has a negative consequence. And so we felt this was, as Kay, you know, is stating, it's a weighing of a balance. And the community members that we're hearing that are attending those events where there's a conflict of interest are supportive of having those young dancers be there. They want them fully engaged. They want them competing. And they're willing to kind of be, or they've at least communicated to us that they can be with that conflict. And it's not the perfect world. And I think maybe when we have other infrastructure, maybe we can look at other things. But this is the reason and the feedback that we took into consideration and why we made this rule change.
So I have board members right now looking at the questions that are still in the chat and volunteering to answer them, which is fantastic. But we are at time for this meeting. So I'm going to thank everybody for joining us today. Will you please let your friends know that we are doing another version of this meeting in a few hours. So we're doing it at 2 different times to try to make sure that people from all over the world can join us if they're able. We're also going to post the recording of this meeting. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you to the board as well. Yvonne, do you want to say anything before we
Yes, I
close our
do.
meeting?
Yes, I do. I want to extend a sincere thank you to everyone that joined us this morning. And a special thank you to Jen for compiling all the slides on very short notice. We were late getting our information to her. So thank you, Jen, and especially to Kay for doing a wonderful job as our moderator. And again, thank you all for joining us and helping us carry out our co-founder's vision, carrying it out forward. So have a great day and thank you for joining us. And as Kay said, let others know we're doing this again this evening. So thank you and goodbye.
Bye, everybody.
Mm-hmm.